Okay, so you really want to know, huh? Fine. I'm gonna start by telling you this. And this is important, so listen up. Your entire life, this one and many others, you've been a god who uses its absolute power to make yourself powerless. Entire cultures, especially this one, have all been afraid of their weaknesses, supposedly, when in reality, they've all been afraid of their power. This goes beyond the matrix of reality. This is something much deeper than that. This is eternal. This is fully realizing your consciousness. This is infinite. This is evolution. This is our divine right.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Vanessa Fernandez of the Enneagram Workshop. Vanessa is a coach and she uses the Enneagram. She's an expert in the developmental system that is ancient and really, really interesting and cool. I've been messing around with it a little bit and I'm very excited to have you on the show. Vanessa, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Truly my pleasure. Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before, and I'm really excited to share what you're working on and your channel, the Enneagram Workshop. Can you talk a little bit about your work and what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm an Enneagram teacher and coach. I love to teach. I'm a nerd myself, so anyone who loves to learn obviously loves to teach, but my real passion is taking that information and allowing it to affect people's lives so they have transformation, because there's a lot that we can learn and that's not the same as it actually impacting our lives and resulting in growth and expansion. So what I love doing is bridging the gap between the two. Obviously, we have to know and understand the system, but then making that next step and helping people really find its application in the rest of their lives. That's what I love.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love that too. I love to see people transform. I love to transform myself. I like to improve. And I think the Enneagram is such a very interesting and amazing tool. Can you talk a little bit about the Enneagram itself and maybe also how you got into that particular method?
Yeah. So I had heard a bunch of bloggers talking about the Enneagram. I thought it was a different language. I didn't even know what they were meant, what it was or anything. And I was scrolling on Amazon for things that I don't need one night. And there was an Enneagram book for 99 cents on Kindle. And I was like, what the heck? I've been hearing all about this. Let me just give it a chance. And of course, I always feel that these truths, these things find us when we need them most. And that was absolutely what happened with me as I started reading into this book. I had always loved personality typing systems, but as soon as I started reading it, I was like, this is so much more. This is not even on the same level as other things I had read or learned about. So just really started diving in. And when I go into something, it's all in. And that has been just very life transformative for me. The Enneagram itself it is an ancient system. Ennea means 9 and gram means symbol. So it's a 9-pointed symbol. I wish I had some sort of fancy graphics that I could make it appear here, but
I can do that for you.
Okay, here we go. It's a 9-pointed symbol. We can just insert it there. And those 9 points symbolize 9 different archetypes of human personality. There are 9, and what it really speaks to are 9 motivations. What motivates us, and over time and observation, it has been discovered that there are 9 different motivations. And it's beautiful. There's a lot of geometry, sacred geometry ascribed to the Enneagram. There's a lot of insights that we can have. We were just talking about the applications in, theater and character development, all the way through to deep spiritual work. There's such a broad application to it. But yeah, that's kind of what the Enneagram is all about. Just learning more about why we do what we do.
Right. Yeah. It's very interesting because I'm also very interested in a lot of personality typing systems as well as astrology. And, I have a lot of friends who are really into that as well. But I have found that the Enneagram itself does really, it gives a light into those motivations, those desires, what really, what really we sort of tend to and even have compulsions to. Myself, as I was telling you before, I'm a 2, and the reason why I knew that was because it literally made me sick to my stomach when I read. I felt so exposed, and I felt just like I don't know, I just felt like my privacy was invaded by the book when I read about a number 2. It was slightly humiliating. And I guess, if that's that might be a way, whatever you read about that maybe cuts to your core, that might be the thing that that kind of tips you off on what your type is. Are there any other tips maybe for people who are trying to explore this and figure out what their types are?
Yeah, absolutely. It does make us feel exposed. It's like this double-edged sword where it makes us feel exposed and sometimes embarrassed, but then it also pulls us in because we feel so seen to the very core of who we are. Like those things, the Enneagram shows us what motivates us, and then it shows us what masks we put on to make our way through the world. And when you read something that cuts through that mask and explains to you why you're putting on that mask, it feels like you have just slashed me open, which is uncomfortable and also intriguing at the same time, because it really does kind of give us hope in one sense that maybe there's nothing wrong with me, quote unquote. Maybe this is just the way that I have made my way through the world. Maybe there is, this is who I'm supposed to be, right? And then we start learning what keeps us in bondage, what allows us to be free, and so on and so forth. And so if you are trying to find your type, my biggest recommendation is to really go to those core motivations. A lot of books and a lot of podcasts or websites will talk about how that motivation manifests, right? So if your motivation is to help people, I'm just going to go with the type 2. If your motivation is to help people, then it might manifest by you're always the one who brings the cookies to the bake sale. Well, yes, but maybe not, right? So a lot of times we can get distracted by the manifestations that are described to us, when what is really indicative of your type is your core motivation. So I would say kind of don't cut out, it's still interesting, but don't let that be sort of what turns you on and off to what your type is, but really stay with that core motivation. And then also it can be difficult. Sometimes we think we know ourselves better than we do. And so if you are having trouble figuring out your Enneagram type, a lot of times with my clients, I tell them, like, let's look at some questions. Let's do some self-reflection, get to know you first, and then we can come back to the Enneagram and all of the descriptions. But if you're not feeling connected to your own self, your own personhood, then it's difficult to step into the Enneagram system and find yourself, right?
Wow.
So that can be.
That's really, really good. That's a really good observation. I like that a lot. Yeah, because at the beginning, like I said earlier, I felt like I could relate to a lot of the types. I felt like there were aspects of myself and my personality and things that I've done in my life that sort of tended toward different ones. And I thought at first that I probably was a 7. So, but through going through deeper and really examining my motivation, that and that I think really is the thing that sets the Enneagram apart from like a personality test or maybe even astrology, where it's like you have all these characteristics that that are part of you, which is it true and interesting. But I also find that it's also often, in my opinion, an excuse to quit your own personal growth and on your path, because you're like, well, I'm a Pisces, so I'm just lazy, I'm just artistic, and that's just who I am, so I'm just, and then you allow yourself for that. Not that there's anything wrong with accepting the parts of yourself, like you're talking about, really connecting to your personhood. That's incredibly important, but just understanding how that function can play out in the world and how to improve truly. So that's really, really cool. So when you work with people, you start out, sort of trying to help them find their own personhood. And then maybe you would then develop into their type in the Enneagram. Is it more a holistic type of work that you do?
Yeah. Well, a lot of Enneagram work is we're trying to rehumanize And what you were speaking to about, kind of using characteristics as an excuse of, well, this is just who I am, this is just how I am. If anything, that's a part of dehumanizing ourselves when we reduce ourselves down to a certain pattern of behavior, or when we reduce ourselves down to certain characteristics. It feels safe to do that. It feels comfortable to do that, but it doesn't really make space for our full humanity. It doesn't really make space for our full embodiment and experience of consciousness that we're here for. So a lot of Enneagram work is, yes, figuring out the motivations for why you do what you do, and then really teasing apart how much of that motivation is coming from a place of fear and lack, and how much of that motivation is coming from a place of abundance and trust. And that's really where, for me, it gets good. That's really where, for me, we can do some work of transformation, because every type, a lot of the motivations come from a place of fear and lack, and come from a place of, I'm really longing for this, but I'm going to settle for that, right? So twos, for example, I'm really longing to be truly loved and belong, but I'm going to settle for just being needed and helpful. There's this is what I really want, but this is what I settle for because I'm coming from a place of fear and lack. I'm a type 3. And so I really want to bring value and beauty to the world, but I settle for being impressive and societally successful, right? So there's this deep longing that we forget, and we substitute with something that feels more attainable when we are looking at the world through a lens of lack, and I don't trust, and I can't rest. And so a lot of the work I do is really just trying to let that fall away, so that we can really embody and go after and allow to come to us what is the true deep longing, and not get stuck in sort of the superficial things we settle for.
Man, that is so good. You're very profound. You have a way with words, for sure. And
Thank you.
yeah, so that's very cool. So finding that, it really does come down to, and I find this is true probably most esoteric work or even deep psychological work, is it really does come down to really understanding who we are, and so the Enneagram just seems to be such a interesting tool for it. And like I was saying before too, I have a friend who is using it to write stories with, narrative stories. And I've been reading about the Enneagram with Beatrice Chestnut's work. A friend of mine sent me her book, and then I've coupled that as well with a book called Rapid Story Development to sort of help me hone in on a friend of mine who I'm writing basically a comedy pilot about him. And it's been so valuably useful. It's almost like cheating a little bit, because it's like, I know how he can sort of digress, like what his weaknesses can be and how to explore those in the narrative, and what, someone else might, with their type, might sort of irritate him. And in comedy, you have to torture your characters. That's just how it is. I'm personally very familiar with that, from an emotional torture, settling, kind of like you were talking about, for being just needed, right? As opposed to really being loved authentically. It's like, well, if I'm needed, my dad too is is he a type 2? Like, he is 239's a type. He's the type, that does the dishes and the laundry and does the gutters and like all of that. I'm different. And like what I was reading in, Beatrice Chestnut's work, that, there are 3 subtypes as well for each one of those types. And there's even one that's kind of like a
Counter type.
Yeah, a counter type. That's exactly how it's put. So that's pretty interesting as well. Could you maybe speak to the subtypes and counter types a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where kind of some of that sacred geometry comes in, where we kind of overlay things. And of course, we're complex beings. So there's variations, right, within each type. And one of the variations that they've discovered is that we have our type, which speaks to motivation, and then we have our subtypes, which are also called instinctual variants. That's another word that people use for it. I like instinctual variants because it speaks to that instinct And it kind of goes back to those survival instincts that as a human species we had to have, especially back when we were surviving off of our wits and caveman days or whatever you want to think of it. And there are three instincts. One is self-preservation, which is I need shelter, I need food, I need water, I need the things that I need to survive, right? Oftentimes in our society, it's more so like I need money, I need security, I need a home that feels safe and that feels protective, right? So that's one instinct. And then we have a social instinct. And the social instinct is we're safer together. There's safety in numbers. If we have a tribe, we can survive better than if I'm a lone wolf. So social instinct really looks to community for security. What's my place in this community? I'm a part of a community. That's important to me. And then we have sexual instinct, which some call one-to-one instinct. And of course, for our species to continue, there has to be procreation, but also there's this deeper aspect to it that I want to know and be known on a deep level that usually can only happen on an individual level. It's hard to really know and be known when there's like hundreds of people in your tribe, but we have this sort of need in order to survive to feel like we're seen. And so that's sort of the primary focus for the sexual dominant subtype or instinct. And all three of these instincts we need to survive. And what happens is we tend to have one that is more dominant. And whatever one is more dominant will affect the flavor of our type. So if you are a social 2, you're going to look quite different than a sexual 2, right? There's different ways that you may go about getting your needs met because of that instinct. So that's super quick and dirty way to describe it. There's, obviously a lot more nuance, but hopefully that gives a little bit of like background.
Oh, it really does. Yeah. I kind of see a little bit of similarity too with like even the parts of the brain. Like if you're a self-preservation, you might be like a little bit more in that lizard brain, whereas maybe the social type might be like a little bit more emotional or mammalian as far as like the pack and stuff goes, which is kind of interesting. I always see reflections of things and other things, which is really, really cool and blows my mind. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of counter type in each one? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so the counter type, what that means is it won't manifest in a way that you would expect it to manifest. So for example, a 2, I'm just gonna go, sorry, bro. Like you're good. You're good. So a 2, right, wanting to be the helper and wanting to be needed. Well, if you are a self-preservation 2, though that seems to be at odds with your motivation to be needed and to be helping everyone else, well, you've also got this instinct that says, but I need to take care of myself. And typically 2s don't do a great job of taking care of themselves because everyone else's needs seem to be more pressing or seem to be more important. So a self-preservation 2 probably will look different than the social and the sexual, and will probably have a harder time seeing themselves in the description of a type 2, simply because that self-preservation instinct being dominant will just affect how that motivation comes across. Wow. And then that's true with every type. So not every type has self-preservation as the counter type. Every type, it may be different, which instinct is the counter type. But
yeah, I think if I remember right, like a 5, I think is the sexual is the counter type or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Which makes sense, because they are like sort of an island ish, so to speak. They sort of see things from their distant. They like to kind of be in their place and see reality from their own sort of, I don't want to say withdrawn, I'm just, for lack of a better word, sort of perspective. So just like understanding a little bit more about that. That's really interesting. I mean, I feel like you could study the Enneagram for a lifetime, probably, and not even.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things about it is how many layers there are to it. And then, once you start going interpersonally, right, you start looking at how the different types interact with each other, whether it's a significant other or a partner or a parent or a friend. There are the literally just endless ways that we can see it. But also, I feel like even if you only know very little bit about it, it can be beautifully helpful, right? It's one of those things that can be as deep or as shallow as you need it to be. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really helpful. And yeah, I think like I have a pretty shallow understanding of it, but I'm going to continue studying it and working with people and trying to implement it, and use it as a tool so
Mhm.
that, we can just kind of dig at, and and uncover
Mhm.
their blind spots really.
Yes.
And that's the
Yeah.
stuff in the shadow where, and I think the shadow gets a bad rap from time to time because the shadow contains not only negative traits and repressed trauma, but it also contains a lot of the skills and abilities that we personally have that we undervalue or simply just don't acknowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the shadow is just helps us see the shape of what's getting in the way of our light. It's just like the more we know our shadow, the more we know um, where our work lies and what it looks like and where we need to be compassionate with ourselves. There's so much beauty in shadow. And I think that's, I don't know, some people have issues with whenever they see things about their Enneagram type, that it's always the negative. That's one of the things that I hear from people is like, oh, you need to say more positive things about my type. And my response to that is always, I'm just saying what is about your type, and you are the one who is perceiving it as being negative. And that it's just interesting how we perceive, if I tell a type 1, for example, that they um, can always notice what is not right in a room, in a person, in a situation. They're always going to notice what is not right. And if they perceive that as being a negative thing, that could be one perception, but another perception could be that's a really valuable and wonderful thing. So again, even the way we respond to what we learn about our type can show us where some of our work may lie and some of our subconscious beliefs about different things. So there's always lots of work to be done.
That's awesome. That's like a face palm right there. Yeah. So, oh, am I telling you negative things or are you perceiving it as negative?
Yeah.
Excellent. And yeah, noticing what's wrong is an incredibly valuable thing for understanding our potential purpose and stuff. It's like if you're sitting around and you're like, this is true in my case, with seeing media and you're like, man, this is just not effective. Like, this is a bad commercial. It's not funny. It's dumb and lame, right? Well, understanding that might give a glimpse to me that's like, hey, you know what? Maybe I should be writing, some sort of narrative device, whether that's a commercial or a sketch or, a full show or do stand-up comedy or whatever that is. It's like I see some glaring problems with this particular format or this particular media or whatever that content might be, then maybe that is a key to uncovering part of my purpose.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how people's types might reflect into their purpose and or function in the world.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much good stuff there because, yes, okay, so there's two sides of this. The first side is what is instinctually easiest and most comfortable and most like for a two, just helping others, doing things that would make others' lives easier. Whereas ones can see what's wrong, twos can see what's needed, right? And so whatever is instinctual to you is going to be the path of least resistance. And so that can be a really great um, starting point to discovering your purpose. I'll just go around the circle because I don't think I have even gone around the circle and kind of given the background of each type. And again, this is going to be quick and not even sufficient, but just to start off.
Cool.
So ones will see what is wrong and will feel that it is theirs to fix. It is theirs to improve. It is theirs to make better. They see what's wrong, but then they also see how it could be. They're very idealistic in that sense. We can fix it. We can do it. Twos are going to see what's needed. So it's a different what's missing. It's a what's lacking in care for other people, what's lacking in provision for other people. And when they see what's needed, they will feel like it's theirs to provide. It's mine to provide what is missing. Threes will see, threes want to achieve a goal and they will see what could be done and what could be accomplished. if we can just pull these resources, if we can set up a plan, if we can baby step it, we can accomplish X, Y, and Z. And all of these things that we see are arising out of a fear, right? One's fear that they are irredeemably flawed, so they're going to see flaws everywhere. Twos feel that they are not going to be provided for or cared for, so they see all the needs and ways that they can care for others. Threes feel that they have no worth or value unless they accomplish, so they're going to see everything that could be accomplished. So all the things that we see are arising out of a fear and a perception of lack within ourselves. I'll keep going around and then we'll circle back to where we can go the other side. But so fours are going to see what is missing, and they're going to see what's mostly missing for fours is deeper meaning. Fours hate small talk. They hate surface level. They don't want to chit chat about X, Y, and Z. They want to know, why are we here? What is the purpose of my life? You know, just the deeper meaning of everything. And that's because fours fear that they have no deeper meaning. Fours fear that they have no greater purpose, right? So they see in the world, there must be a deeper meaning to everything. They're projecting out where they feel lack. Fives, they have a craving to be competent and to be well-researched and to stand firm upon knowledge. And the fear that fives have is that they lack knowledge, that there's something that they are missing. Fives are not comfortable in mystery. They want certainty, because a lack of certainty feels unsafe for fives. So they're always going to see where there are inaccuracies. They're great researchers, and they're going to proofread and find all the errors, and that feels safe for them. Sixes are going to see, sixes are going to see a lot. They feel that the world is unsafe, extremely unsafe. So they're going to see all the ways that danger can appear. And that's because they do not have a trust in their inner ability to keep themselves safe. So in order to outrun that, they have to see where danger could lurk and have a plan for kind of dealing with it. And that shows a lack of trust in themselves, right? So they're projecting the lack of trust in themselves by seeing the entire world as a dangerous place. Sevens are going to see the potential for joy and pleasure and excitement. They are going to always have plans upon plans for having fun, for enjoying life. And that's because they are deathly afraid of experiencing pain, right? So they don't want to experience any pain. And so all they are willing themselves to see in the world are the joys and the pleasure and the optimism. And then eights always see the injustice that is happening, the way that the underdog is being taken advantage of. And the projection of that is eights felt like they were taken advantage of as children, that they were not protected, that they were not safe. And so they're always on the lookout for the one who will take advantage of. They are suspicious. They don't trust easily. And again, it's just that projection coming out of a fear, an inner fear that they have. And then nines, they crave peace. So what they see are all perspectives. They see every situation from any possible perspective. And when you look at the Enneagram symbol, the 9 sits right at the top. And they sit at the top and they can see down over every type and the way that every type sees the world. And what they want to do is reconcile. They want to reconcile all perspectives, and they make a lot of space for people to have their own opinions. But it's being projected out of a fear that they cannot sit in chaos or in conflict. And so they want to be able to reconcile that everyone has a valid voice, because for there to be discord and disharmony feels utterly unbearable for type 9s. So you can see where that can speak to each of their purpose. 9s could be mediators. 8s could fight for social justice. 7s can throw all the parties. 6s can, be the safety officer, making sure nothing goes wrong. 5s can do all the research for us. 4s can create beauty out of brokenness. 3s can, achieve all of the goals, and 2s help everyone feel cared for, and 1s make sure that we're all right and good. And that's wonderful. However, if we go full force, headlong into the instinct of our type, that instinct was created to protect the fear. And never bringing balance to that can send us into disharmony, can send us, in the Enneagram, we call it going into excess of your type, right? If your whole world is, for a 9, what I can achieve, well, then what happens when I fail? If your whole world is in helping others, what happens when you can't? If your whole world is in being good and right, what happens when you make a mistake, right? So we can find our purpose in where our instinct gives us the most, kind of natural flow. But I would encourage for us to be intentional to also bring up the balancing energy of that. Because if we go headlong into instinct, it can definitely take us into excess, which is not always healthy for us. So sorry, that was a lot, but I thought it'd be good to go around each type, because there's a lot of potential for finding your purpose, and there's a lot of potential also for finding some growth that you might want to do.
No, that was excellent. No, it was really, you're holding court. It's pretty awesome. So thank you for that. So that's talking to what's instinctually easy for us, what the path of least resistance might entail for our types. Obviously, getting mired down into our instinct too much is going to be unhealthy for us. Can we talk about the other side of that coin then, I guess, like the challenges that we might face based on our types?
Yeah. So, all right, so I'll go backwards this time. I'll start with 9 and kind of work my way back. I feel bad 9s always get the last. But to bring balance, 9s are at their healthiest when they're able to assert themselves, when they're able to make some waves and maybe create some, right? Because if all points are valid, you'll never assert that one point is a right point or the best point, right? 9s can kind of have trouble making decisions. Well, whose point do I pick, right? They want just everyone to get along and everyone to be right. And 9s are at their healthiest when they kind of put their foot down and say, I'm going to assert myself. I'm going to make some waves. And so that is a great way for 9s to kind of move in the opposite direction and bring that balance. For 8s to bring balance to that sort of suspicion that everyone's out to get them is to trust and to be vulnerable, to let people in to see them. And that's risky for an 8. And so, but that's beautiful, right? That presses into that feeling of abundance and trust versus fear and lack, right? That's what that's doing for the type 8. For the type 7, it really is slowing down enough to be present with what is. And what is usually a mixture of both good and bad, light and dark, pleasure and pain. And that's the reality that the 7s crave, but they sacrifice reality for, the imaginations of tomorrow and how fun it's going to be, right? So sitting in what's now and believing you can stay there. For 6s, the balance is going to be to trust. And not even to trust others, but to trust themselves. One of my favorite activities that I do with my type 6 clients is I have them write down at the beginning of the day everything that they're afraid of might go wrong. And it's usually quite an extensive list, right? I might forget my keys. My daughter might spill stuff all over her new outfit. I might get locked in the basement and there's a fire. Well, wherever their minds go, they write it all out. And at the end of the day, I tell them to cross off everything that did not happen. And as they go through, and of course, the majority of those things never happen. And yet they take up mental space. They take up energy. They take up anxiety for the 6. And then we look at what remained. Maybe you did lock your keys inside the car. Maybe that did happen. We look at what remained and what actually did happen. And what we do is we say, but did you figure it out? Did you make it through? Did you survive those terrible things that had filled you with anxiety? They happened. You figured it out. You're here today. We live another day. And that brings that self-confidence back to the 6. That yes, the world is a dangerous place, but you are stronger and more capable than you could imagine, right? So that's the balancing energy for the 6. Not to tell them like, nothing bad will ever happen to you, right? That disrespects the fear that they have, but more so, things will happen and you will get through. You'll find a way. I love 6s, so sometimes I go off on my 6. 5s can balance out their need for certainty with being okay in mystery, allowing for some things to just not have to be figured out, that they're still safe, even if they're not fully competent in things. 4s can find balance by not always having to find a greater meaning in everything. And what's tricky with fours is, when you try to find a meaning in everything, usually your bias kicks in and it ascribes a meaning that makes sense to your own internal narrative. And fours are in what we call the shame triad. Twos, threes, and fours are all in the shame triad. So what makes most sense to a type four's inner narrative is there's something wrong with you, right? That's shame. That's the shame piece. And so every meaning that the four will ascribe to whatever is happening in their life will be a meaning that comes back to the fact that there's something wrong with them. And that rejects the fullness of their humanity, that there's both shadow and light, and there's nothing wrong with you. You are who you are. And in one sense, there's no greater meaning to that. You just are, and you exist. And that's enough, right? So for fours to bring balance would be to expand and allow for there to be some deeper meaning to things, and other things, they just are. For threes to bring balance would be to fall apart sometimes. To always be achieving and always be maintaining an image of success is exhausting. And so threes can balance out and say, you know what, my value does not rest in what I do. So sometimes I can just stop and just fall apart. For twos, it's somewhat similar, but rather than achieving things for themselves, achieving things for others, they can allow that to not always have to be what they do. They can take care of themselves. Their needs matter too. And that's the balance that twos can embrace. And then for ones, it all belongs is a mantra that I love giving to ones. It all belongs, the good and the bad, the seamlessly executed and the fabulously flawed, the ugly and the good, the high and the low, the light and the dark. It all belongs. And once they can rest in that, then yes, they could see how things can be better, and they can choose to fix them or not, because it could belong. So that's kind of where we can balance out each type.
Wow, that's really, really good. Incredible, actually. You demonstrating quite the mastery over the Enneagram, and I'm learning so much because, like I said, I've been studying this stuff, but I like the way that I love your perspective of it, and the way that you express how it all fits together in those different aspects of each one of the types, which I do feel like there are parts of me that we're all human. And so, something that you were saying earlier about like each one of these perspectives, like the nine's at the top. And so it can see the other perspectives, but each one of these types has its own perspective, which is part of the whole. So, we're all, we can all relate to each one of these. And I'm as you're talking to, I'm like, people are just jumping out of my mind. Like my grandmother was such a type 6, man. We were really close too.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's really fun too, is when you do find people in the Enneagram, right? You start to see them through these archetypes. It allows for such compassion. It allows for such compassion to realize they were functioning out of their own flavor of fear, right? They were functioning out of as best as they could. They were trying to make their way through the world and remain safe and whole and loved. And that just helps a lot because the way that our type manifests can really cause harm to other people, unfortunately. But when we see that it's coming from a place of fear and lack, I don't know, at least for me, it's like breaks my heart and allows me to show up in compassion and understanding with others, as opposed to like, why would you do that? Why do you react that way? Why is this, you're right. So you have, especially those certain types that just, you can't even, you're like, I don't get it. Why are you like this? Why do you shut down? Why do you lash out? Why, and it just helps us to say, oh, okay, I get it,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that it really does allow us to take someone else's perspective, to really put ourselves in their shoes, because we've all heard that a bajillion times in life, but it's like, how can you really when you put yourself in someone else's shoes, you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes in your body.
Yes.
So it's not the same as really putting yourself in their shoes. You're like, well, if I was in their position, I wouldn't be upset because it doesn't affect me that way.
Right.
But if you can allow yourself the perspective to be like, oh, well, it's, for instance, a type 2, well, I see how they might see, they did all this stuff and they didn't, get that recognition or that love maybe that they were craving, And that's something that I recently have been working really, really hard on, because I would find myself in groups, especially, or partnerships or whatever, and I would give so much to those groups. Like, for instance, I might like do like a very involved edit of a podcast or a video or something for the group. And then when I did my own content, I'd be like, it's good enough. I don't need to, do those edits or make it, really pop or anything like that. And trying to be more aware of that and be more healthy, I've put a lot more emphasis, energy, time, and attention into my own work, so that it's not, it's not dazzling by any stretch of the imagination, but it's more intentional. People's attention will hopefully be, more people maybe more invest more of their attention in it, etc. Just trying to do more.
Yeah, and it's also the symbolism of that, right? The symbolism of taking your time and energy toward your own work is a part of rehumanizing, is a part of honoring yourself, honoring your needs, honoring your work. And that in and of itself is beautiful. And that's incredible. Like that's the work right there, is noticing and then taking action to kind of go in the opposite direction. And what I love about the Enneagram is it does reveal those blind spots that if nobody told you, never in a million years would you instinctively grab more time and energy for your projects when someone else's project needed help, right? In no world would it ever just arise from inside of you of like, I'll give them like the less than, excellent work and I'll take all the excellent work. You would never ever get there unless you were being intentional to say, no, this is a way for me to grow, rehumanize, and come back to myself, right? It has to be revealed to us through some sort of archetypal structure because the ego just doesn't allow for that to instinctively come up. And that's what I love about it, is it's just like, it's a map that we didn't know we needed.
Bars, bro. I return your volley on the bro. I love it. It's great. So I think it's a little bit psychological and a little bit spiritual, and I think there's probably a lot of different applications for the Enneagram. I wanted to say I'm basically out of sort of questions for you as far as things go. I really appreciate you sharing everything. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about, that we can maybe mention now, and then we'll get to how people could find a way to work with you?
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, there's always a million other things that I like to talk about, but I would say, anytime that we increase our self-awareness, I really want to make sure that we are also increasing our self-compassion at the same time. I can tend to be a glutton for suffering, and I love to just like, tell me what's wrong with me. I just want to get in there. And yet I have found that the more, if I am trying to fix myself, if I am trying to, come in heavy-handed and say, well, I just want to know all this stuff so I don't experience this pain anymore, this suffering anymore, and I'm not also increasing self-compassion and gentleness, it can be re-wounding in a sense. It can almost cause more harm than good. And so I would just say, if you are going to dive into the Enneagram, do so gently, compassionately. I do feel like it's helpful to have a spiritual guide or a therapist or a mentor, someone who can even just hold space and allow you to have some self-compassion, because that's my only fear sometimes is the increase of self-awareness can feel like a lot. If we don't increase that self-compassion right along with it, it's not always helpful. So yeah, that would be sort of my last thing that I'd love to make sure people know.
That's an excellent caveat. I can 100% relate to that. You know, if you're changing paradigms in your life, you know, like your reality goes through a bit of at least a shock, if not total dismantlement. So,
Yeah.
in some cases, for me, it was that way, where somebody just took a sledgehammer to my reality, and I was just like, oh my God, nothing is the way it seems, you know, like, so and that can be absolutely devastating. So giving yourself the space and ability to, you know, compassion, allow yourself to grow, allow yourself to make mistakes. Don't just, you know, bombard yourself with ways to improve, and, you know, and critical feedback and what's wrong about you. Because then you're just traumatizing yourself at that point. That's no way to heal. We want to develop and heal as well. So very, very good point. And yeah, please tell people how they can work with you, find more of your content, and connect and learn more about the Enneagram as well.
Yeah, so I am most active on my Instagram page, which is at the Enneagram Workshop. And I also throw videos up on YouTube. I try every couple times a month, throw some videos up there. And you can, you know, reach out to me on either of those platforms. And I offer, have a group membership community where we go through different topics. We've covered everything from grief and trauma to family of origin, to self-care, to body image, and we'll continue on with lots of other topics, you know, goal setting and risk and how we respond to that, right? My goal with that group community is let's pluck out actual life experiences. Let's pluck out actual life situations and then lay the Enneagram on top of that and explore, because this is where we live, right? We live with our families. We live with having to take risks. We live in our bodies and all of the messages about body image, right? So I want to take actually where we live and then bring in some of this deeper spiritual work. So that is the main way that I do coaching, is through that community. And then I also have coaching programs that I do one-on-one. And that's what I love to do. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you're doing great work. I've learned a tremendous amount from this chat with you right now. And I know a lot of people are going to really enjoy your perspective on this. So I really appreciate you bringing your knowledge and sharing your time with me today. It's been super fascinating. And like I said, I was watching some of your videos on YouTube and I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. So I really appreciate you responding and taking some time to chat with me today. It's been enlightening for sure.
Good, absolutely. And I enjoy your channel as well. I just felt like I don't often respond to a lot of inquiries if I don't know the person, you know, personally, but just going through your videos and seeing your heart and seeing the way that you really are, like we kind of talked about this taking these deeper spiritual things that really are transformative, like in a massive way, and trying to allow them to intersect with people's lives sort of in a gradual, compassionate, like organic, beautiful way. I'm all about that. Like that's, yes, let's talk, let's have this discussion. So it's been great. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the kind words. It means a lot. And yeah, I really want to try to bring like an understanding of like quantum, weird, all these crazy, you know, ideas to like a more of a blue collar type of awareness, you know, like where it's accessible and simple to understand. And it is true. Yeah, I'm sincere. I do want to help people. I also am a comedian, so I'll be putting out some really funny stuff actually in the future as well. So I hope that that's not like too much of a juxtaposition for people as they continue on, because it is a little bit, I don't know, it can be a little bit off-putting, but if I can resolve it, I'll be able to do like quite the cool juxtaposition, I think.
But you know, I love that, because I think it does speak to the non-duality of the human experience, that we are both, you know, deep and complex, and yet, you know, videos of dogs running around in costumes just make us roll on the floor laughing. You know, like that's who we are. And I think anytime we try to reduce down to like, well, I only speak on intellectual matters, like no, like if we are who we are, we're our fullness, and let's be in our fullness. So I think that's fantastic. I look forward to seeing some of that content from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, I love your perspective on this and how you describe the way you work with people too, because it seems like you're really applying, these concepts in a very real way, in a very, timely way as well. It's almost like taking like a case study and applying, like what is the reality of our situation and how is it reflected with the tools that we have to use. So it's very, very cool. Very cool. Um, Absolutely. No, thank you. And that is Vanessa Fernandez, the Enneagram Workshop. Find her on Instagram, YouTube as well. And I'll have links in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.